Well, greetings. I've been looking forward to this discussion for some time. And as somebody who talks with a lot of advisors throughout the country, what I've realized is this is an important topic that needs to be addressed. Um, and that is specifically starting the conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and get the uh, PowerPoint here up so that way we can really take a deep dive in. Today, what we're going to be talking about is starting the conversation. And what this is aimed at is being a playbook for financial advisors and CPAs who are introducing exit planning to clients for the first time. This is a particular challenge that really, at the end of the day, it's not very difficult to overcome. It's just a matter, simply put, of basically jumping in and figuring out what you need to say and how you need to say it. It's not very difficult. Um, it's something that really anybody could do. And the reason why it is such an important topic is as more and more people are needing to exit their business with a silver tsunami, these are going to be conversations that, regardless of who you are, I mean, you may not even necessarily be wanting to work with business owners. You may have a couple business owners in your book, but when the time comes, the whole purpose of this webinar is to help you know how you can address these issues. So let's go ahead and dive in here. Why this is important is very often with a lot of business owners, the business is the retirement plan. Um, and you see the numbers up here. This really should give us some cause for discussion, and the reason why is because when it comes to determining value of business, it's the EBITDA multiple that is going to be really one of the primary drivers, and then you're going to take that multiple and multiply it times the EBITDA, and that is going to be what the value of the business is. Well, as you can see here, we have a gap of between 1.5 to 3 is an exit multiple when it comes to businesses that are operationally prepared and those that are not. Now, just to emphasize how stark that could be, in a worst case scenario, you could be looking at a business that gets a multiple of 4 when it really could have gotten a multiple of 7. On a business that, say has, let's use 3 million EBITDA, for example, they're getting 12 when at the end of the day, you do the math, they could have been getting 21. That's a $9 million gap. So this is a really serious gap that could cost somebody millions. And right there, the middle one, 3 to 5 years is the typical operational run rate that preparation actually takes. And this is not something that you're going to be able to fix in the final year. One of the fallacies that I come across is a lot of people think when it comes to getting ready to exit their business, it's kind of like retirement. Many business owners have friends who they'll be like, I've decided the next year is a year that I'm going to retire. And all they really need to do is let the boss know that this is going to be their final year and then just start making the preparations. The problem is with the business owner who's also the operator, that doesn't work. And it's because of the fact that it has so much more complexity. There's a leadership team that needs to be completely built out. There are operational needs that need to be documented, processes that need to be mapped, policies and procedures that we need to make sure get written down. So all told, there's a reason why it's 3 to 5 years. It's because there's a lot. Now, that is the average enterprise value you see that tends to be left on the table if the gap isn't closed. And, that's, obviously, those numbers are based on an EBITDA of 1 million. It could get much worse, much fast if those numbers are bigger. So this is a key, um, a very important topic for us to have. And you see the line at the bottom is this isn't about becoming an operational expert. It's about not staying silent when the runway closes. And hopefully, this gives us a little bit of a background on what that runway looks like. So, again, you do the math. If it's 3 to 5 years to prepare, that business owner really needs to start having thoughts about that at least 5 to 7 years beforehand. So the math and everything, all these numbers, it should really emphasize, not only the timetable, but the importance of this. So what the whole purpose of this session is going to be this, is there are going to be 6 things that we're looking at for you to be able to walk out with after this session. First thing is we want you to recognize the 3 signal categories, wealth planning, business, and timing, that flag a client as a candidate and that, they're in need of this specific exit planning attention. Next one is we're going to take a look at why advisors will hesitate and get a little bit of an understanding why. And why hesitation is usually going to cost clients more than the conversation would. And, in some cases, if you're a financial advisor, it could actually come back to bite you hard. Next step is, opening the conversation with language is calibrated to your role. A financial advisor, when they're introducing this topic, they're not going to be having the same opening that a CPA does. So it's important that we realize that when it comes to addressing this topic, that we're addressing it with the right verbiage that, causes people to not necessarily be turned off, but realize, hey, this person is, they're right on. So the next thing is we need to be able to speak credibly about operational exit readiness without being an operational expert yourself. Really, the purpose of this webinar is to help you to have the tools that you need in order to discuss these conversations and make the right introductions. One thing I have found some advisors believe is they think, okay, well, they actually need to be involved with a lot of this work. Well, the problem is if you're an advisor, you may have a couple hundred clients. And if you have a couple hundred clients, you can't be giving that level of individualized attention to one. So knowing how to speak about it, and this is where, having a advisor in this capacity as a fractional that you would work with is going to be invaluable because it gives you the opportunity to get the right introduction to the right professional to help your client. The next one is handling the 3 most common forms of client pushback without losing the relationship. Pushback's going to be expected. I mean, really, the big thing that you need to do is on this point is it's not necessarily a matter of trying to sell somebody something, but addressing what they need. The reality is 100% of people will exit their business. So this isn't something that, it's going to give somebody an advantage per se. No, this is a reality that they need to come to terms with. Now, really, the final one takeaway is what you need to do exactly 48 hours after the conversation. So let's go ahead and dive in. And, this is kind of what our agenda looks like. And, we're going to really dive into this methodically. And again, my goal at the end of this time is to help anybody who is new to this topic have a really good, firm grasp of everything that is involved. And the big reason why is at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that everybody's successful and has what they need in order to succeed. So diving in, here is a look side by side at 2 of the key advisors in the exit planning process. And, this is the reason why we need to approach things differently is just because advisors and CPAs, they handle things differently. The financial advisor, they're relationship forward, comfortable with referral culture, whereas, a CPA, they tend to be analytical. They're skeptical of anything that resembles a pitch. With the financial advisor, they're kind of more like the CFO. They're looking forward. They have the strategy. The CPO is doing more like controller work. They're looking backwards. It's not necessarily a matter of one vantage point is superior to the other. It's just like in the controller and CFO roles in a business, they're just looking in different directions. Now, the primary lens that a financial advisor and a CPA will look through is something like this. The financial advisor is concerned about wealth plan integrity, and their primary focus is, does the projected number hold up? This makes sense, especially, even from a personal standpoint, because after all, most advisors, they're compensated based on AUM. And making sure that the projected number holds up not only is incentivized for their clients, but also for them. Now, with the CPA, they're concerned with financial statement integrity. Do the numbers and the story match? This is something that is really, really, really important just because of the fact that at the end of the day, when it comes to taxes, obviously we need to make sure the numbers match. So, the CPA, they're all about making sure that everything adds up completely. Now, let's take a look briefly at the triggers. First of all, we have the liquidity timeline and the net worth concentration. That is the trigger that if you're a financial advisor, you need to be really keying on. Whereas, with the CPA, the trigger there should be, if the books, they're talking about exiting and the books are informal and you realize, hey, there are a lot of add backs here that are just not going to survive due diligence. We need to address it. So again, those are the two big triggers. And then, when it comes to earning trust is, for financial advisors, the focus is on reciprocity, shared client outcomes. And then with the CPA is credibility and specificity and really a clear non-competitive boundary. And this is why I love working with both CPAs and financial advisors, is because of the fact that at the end of the day, I'm not doing CPA type of work. I can't, just because of, the way my firm is built. And then with a financial advisor, at the end of the day, if you have a big liquidity event that increases your AUM, that's what I'm working towards, just because of the fact that it's a success for me. So the reality is financial advisors, CPAs, and then, of course, using CPA terminology, what I am is a value accelerator. All of us are looking for the exact same goal. And, what we want to do is we just want to make sure that everybody is successful and that we're able to get the job done and get the job done right. So now that we've looked at that, let's take a brief look at why we hesitate and why it's misplaced. Well, the first thing is it's not my lane. That's a legit issue and hesitation. It's like, well, it's not my lane. But here's what you need to do is, even if you look at it and you realize a solution is not in your lane, flagging the risk to the client's plan, what is so important is it's like, okay, this is a risk. And, even though I'm not qualified to do it, this is somebody who can do it. So, if it's not in your lane, but you see it's a problem, is something that could very quickly become an issue, yes, this is where having the right professionals to recommend is crucial. Next line, it will look like I'm selling something. Now, yeah, that might look at it, but here's the reality. What you're not doing is you're not trying to sell operational services. What you're trying to do is you're trying to develop something that's going to really, at the end of the day, help essentially remedy issues that exist, but at the same time preserve value. Next thing, I don't want to alarm them. That's a legit issue because, you might think, yeah, this might be a problem. They might get alarmed about it. Well, here's the reality. A 20-minute no obligation conversation rarely harms anyone. A collapsed valuation and diligence, and they never got a call, that does. So, not wanting to alarm somebody is legit. And really, the way that we can actually build on that is by thinking, okay, how can we phrase the conversation so that way we don't alarm them? The final thing is I don't know what to say. And that is a real reason. And this is what the whole purpose of the webinar is because is when you see a situation, you realize there's a problem, like I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to have the conversation. Well, that is what our objective is. And let's move into this next section, which is about reading the signals. I have here wealth planning signals, business signals, and time signals. And really, as you can see at the bottom, the threshold is one or two signals is really a note to watch. Once you're hitting three or more, that's when it's like, okay, we got some serious work to do. So on the wealth planning side, the business is the client's primary or only significant asset. The reality is most business owners, 80 to 90% of their wealth is tied up in that business. So really what we need to be thinking of in these terms is that, if all of this wealth is concentrated in this particular asset, then, that in and of itself is a big thing for us to be aware of. Now, exit proceeds are the centerpiece of the retirement plan. This is a reality. In fact, I remember a while back a business owner that I worked with who really was not the strongest when it came to planning or strategy. And really, that there was a lot that he could have done differently. That was what he viewed as like this business was going to be his retirement plan. And already you can see right there, without getting too deeply in, we already have two signals that we need to be watching. So you'll be watching pretty much any business owner at this point. Now, there's a liquidity event expected in 3 to 5 years. This is not necessary. This is a little different from, the forced exits, which, that's a reality that a lot of business owners need to make is they may need to exit their business. And then there's no diversification outside the business. All the wealth is just concentrated there. And while there might be some savings and whatnot, it's just not diversified. Now, the business signals is like, okay, you have revenue between 2 to 50 million. There are businesses. I mean, obviously, I will serve up to 100 million, but the reality is, this is probably closer to the range that, most people will see. The owner is still involved in day-to-day operations. They may not necessarily be involved with every part of the process, but if there's any level of decision making that involves their input at any point during the day, that's involvement in day-to-day operations. So almost always, so pretty much right now at this point with most business owners, you have already hit this threshold. And we still have half the list to go through. So I hope the point right now really needs to be this is even though we have more signals we're going to go through, there's a very good chance right now that anybody who has business owner clients who is watching that you've already hit the threshold and you need to start the conversation now. There's no management team that can run the business independently. In other words, if your business owner client can't go on vacation for a week or so without things falling apart, there's no management team. And I remember a business owner I worked with once who almost invariably he'd go on vacation for a couple weeks and then he would come back and it would take several months to get everything, all the pieces put back together. He'd go on vacation again and take a couple more months. And this was an endless cycle. So, if there's no management team there, which that tends to be the case, especially if they're still involved in day-to-day operations, this is a must-have discussion. Now, are your operations informal or undocumented? It'd be a fairly easy tell just because of the fact if you're talking with them and it feels like everything they do is they shoot from the seat of their pants, very good chance that things are informal. So now let's go to the timing signals. And really, I hope at this point, most people listening to this realize I need to start talking with my business owner clients. The timing signals is, the owner mentioned, yeah, I might be selling in the next few years. Okay, really, your next follow up question should be, when are you planning on selling? Another timing signal is they're approaching retirement age, or they may have had a recent health event. I know this happens a lot more because after all, the 5Ds are the responsibility for about 50% of exits. So, approaching retirement age or a health event, you know, very good chance that one of those 5Ds might be in place. A previous sale attempt fell through, which, that really should be an immediate red flag, like, okay, there's something seriously wrong. And, if you've talked with them and there's really no succession plan, that's a must have. I mean, most of the time we think about having a buy sell in place, but the reality is you need to have that succession plan. And if it's not resolved or non-existent, then it's time. So I hope in reading the signals, and it's possible that some of us, we haven't actually observed these signals yet, but you know, be looking for these signals because these are tells. And if you start seeing them, then you need to start having the conversation. So let's just take a look at, the opening that a financial advisor would probably be best encouraged to pursue. And what it is along the lines of this. Uh, the exit proceeds are a core part of the plan we've built together. I want to make sure the business is actually positioned to deliver that number. There's someone I work with who focuses on exactly that. Would a 20-minute conversation be worth your time? Now, again, please use this in your phraseology and your terminology. But what is important is this is how you need to frame it. Just because of the fact is, at the end of the day, yes, you've been in charge. You've been helping to build up their assets and whatnot. But the reality is that what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're able to preserve it, and just emphasizing like, look, this is a team. Let's get this conversation going. This is really important. So that's how the financial advisor would open it. Now, what I want us to do is let's take a look at the CPA at the moment. And what we're going to see is this is framed a little differently as well. I handle the numbers in the tax picture. There is an operational piece, the leadership bench, documented processes, the systems a buyer will actually diligence that sits outside what I do. And it's the piece that most often moves the number of clothing. I work with someone who focuses on that. Worth a short conversation? Again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to frame it not necessarily as I'm going to sell you this. It's a matter of like, okay, here is a piece of the equation, considering where you are, that you really need to consider implementing. So now that we've gotten that, let's take a quick look at the 3 rules for both scripts. If you've watched this webinar and look, hey, I'd like to have a screenshot, or could I please have access to the slides or any of the scripts, please let me know. I also do have a resource guide for both CPAs and financial advisors that is aimed at really helping you along these conversation we're having. But here are the 3 rules that you need to do for both scripts. And number 1, anchor, don't announce. And really, don't use sale or exit just because of the fact that, that's just going to send the wrong message, especially with exit. And even though we talk about exit planning, the terminology I think is better is value acceleration. Exit planning, it immediately sends people the message of like, okay, your time is up and it's time to move on. With value acceleration, it's the same concept that we're doing, but using terminology that's a little less potent, if you know what I mean. So first thing is anchor, don't announce. Next thing is ask for the conversation, not the commitment. And really what it is, the whole purpose is this needs to be a short, no obligation conversation. One thing I definitely would not mind doing, and I've had intro calls with people before, and I have not expected to go to discovery right on our first call. Sometimes it might be just a matter of, an introduction. And then, maybe when it comes time to sit down and meet with the um, advisor, who's might be handling the sale and a financial advisor, CPA. But the reality is, just start with a no obligation conversation. And, really, there doesn't need to be a fee discussed. Um, really, as far as I'm concerned with what I do, and, there's materials on my site and really on videos that talk about our process. Um, we don't talk about fees until we actually have a proposal on the table. So there's a good chance there are going to be as many calls as we need in order to get comfortable and really build up the rapport. So really at the end of the day, fees don't need to be on the table, especially if it's a conversation that at the end of it they realize they're not ready for this. Now, here's what the most important thing is: you need to keep the relationship. The introduction, really, the whole focus is a division of the labor and not a handoff. When it comes to the work that I do, I think that the best way to explain it is we view it as really a three-pronged stool. The work that I do is one of those legs. Uh, the financial advisor or the CPA, whichever is the one having this discussion, is the other leg, just because you're the one kind of looking after the client for their, well-being and for the tax prep. And then the M&A advisor who is handling the sale process. Um, you still have the relationship. It's not like that your role is done. No, you still have a major role to play. It's just you have other people who are coming in who are now working alongside you. So that is a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, here are 4 exit killing challenges that it's worth, kind of parking on for a little bit. The first one is founder dependency. And, that is, the business is unable to run without its owner. This is a very common cause, and it's probably one of the biggest killers. If not killing the deal, it will cause a substantial deal devaluation. And it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Basically, that business cannot exist without the founder. The next one is data chaos, and that is unreliable metrics and no real visibility into performance. It's pretty straightforward here. It's just, this includes books that really need to be cleaned up, and you just can't get the information you need. Then we have process gaps where there's a lot of knowledge that's tribal, and instead of documented transferable systems, it's like, okay, well, it's anybody's guess. The business is fine as long as everybody else comes along. Operational inefficiency, you're basically a firefighting in place of strategic execution. And one area I would label under this is I would put the client concentration issue. And the reason why is I label that as under operational efficiency is a business that is really growing and is really efficient. Their goal is to service as many clients as possible. Well, if you have client concentration with, say, one client doing 40% of your work, to me, that's a sign that, okay, you're not as efficient as you could be just because you're just relying on one really large account to provide the work that you need. So here are what we at Fractional Leadership Solutions handle when it comes to the to getting things fixed up operationally. I've talked a lot about the questions and that really discussions that you should have, really what you should be looking for. This is going to kind of give you an idea about how we handle things. First off is, getting the data and analytics as clean and as spot on as possible, making sure that there's budget development and controls in place. Strategic planning. Do we have that rigor in place? And if so, do we feel like everything is set so that way, um, the business is going to be able to plan properly moving forward? Processes, policies, and procedures developed. Do we have good institutional memory that is able to retain everything so that way this business is completely transferable? Are our operations optimized? Are we operating at peak efficiency, getting the work done that we need to? Multi-channel marketing. I mean, do we have a really clear marketing plan? And do we understand the return on investment that our marketing efforts is doing as we're trying to build the brand as well as, promote our products? And then, we have tech analysis and improvements. Is our tech stack modern and up to date? One example of this tech stack is there are about 10 to 20,000 businesses in the 5 to 50 million revenue range that I kid you not, are using a program in QuickBooks Desktop that was discontinued in September of 2024. So those are 7 areas that we're going to look at to really make sure that this business is ready. Now, here is probably what I want you to think most about is you're not being asked to evaluate operations, build a roadmap, or manage an engagement. All you need to do in this process is make sure that you do the introduction. And it's obviously an introduction with somebody that you feel comfortable with and somebody who is going to do the job and do it right. After that, what comes next is you're going to be coordinating. I know with a lot of the advisors I work with, I like to have recurring cadences. Everybody is different, but the reality is that, when it comes to what happens after these introductions, other people who are handling it, let them handle it. But really what you're doing is you're coordinating a lot of things. And you're still going to be the advisor. And the reality is, it doesn't matter how many more advisors come in. It's not like this introduction pushes you out. No, if anything, the goal with this is post sale for you to be the one handling the proceeds of that sale. Hopefully it'll be a 20, 30, or $40 million increase in your AUM. So here are some items of pushback. It would all be wonderful if this is the case, and rather often this is probably going to be the case when somebody realizes and they're like, okay, I would say a lot of the time there are a lot of people who want somebody to have this discussion and they're waiting for somebody. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be all clear sailing. Here's, the first thing is I'm not ready to think about selling. That's a great example. That gives you a great frame in mind. Well, here's a possible response. This isn't about selling now. It's about making sure that if you sell in 5 years, that number holds up. The earlier start, the less it costs to fix anything. Another angle I would add is with the 5Ds. It's possible that you might not have that option to exit in 5 years. It's possible that you may actually have to exit now. I think of a business owner earlier this year who came to me and an investment banker I work with, and he needed to exit now. He was at the point that really he just could not continue with the business. He'd gone through one of the 5 Ds and wanted to leave, but the problem was he wasn't anywhere close. He wanted to get out as fast as possible, but you know, it would have taken several years. If that is a situation we wouldn't want you to be in, and even though there's a lot of skills and a lot of abilities I have, I can't work magic. And what's important is that you need to be willing to acknowledge. If you're a business owner, you need to realize that if you don't do anything about something, and then the time comes you need to exit, there's a possibility that nobody can do anything. Okay, I already have someone who handles that. Hey, that's great pushback, and here's what you can respond is good. I mean, this isn't a replacement for anyone on your team. It's a specific operational piece most teams don't staff for. For example, they might be thinking, well, I have somebody who handles my operations. They're my operations manager or whatnot. Hey, there are businesses that have a director of operations, but they also have a COO. And the difference is the director of operations is very much involved in, the core product. Whereas the COO, they're more involved in, the entirety of business operations as well. So, just because you're like, okay, well, I have somebody, doing that as an office manager stuff. Well, you may have somebody handling that piece, but operations is much bigger than, just basically pertaining to the product development. Next question, what does this cost me? Well, here's the question, but here's a good answer. Well, the introduction cost you nothing, and there's no obligation. If it's not a fit, we've lost 20 minutes. My price and really my firm's pricing is we're actually moving very shortly to a monthly retainer of $6,000 per month. And really what the whole purpose of this is going to give you one dedicated day per week. And it's actually not just going to be one fractional. It's actually going to be a team of fractionals where you'll have one fractional be working. And then, of course, I will actually remain involved as well. So you'll have one person on a day-to-day basis as well as me. And so, well, yeah, that might look like a cost, $72,000 a year. Yeah, that's definitely not chump change. But the reality is if you have that for 3 years and we're able to save you several million, that's a pretty good return on investment. And it's something that really is worth considering. But as far as our concern is like, let's just talk. Why bother with a price if we're going to get to the end of the conversation and we realize, yeah, we don't mesh well with each other. So here is what I'm going to encourage you for your next step. One client, 10 business days. First thing is identify one client this week who is clearing 3 or more signals. And, that's the list that we had earlier. And what I'd encourage you to do is to, take the conversation framework that we laid out and use your roles opening language. If you're a financial advisor, use that. If you're a CPA, use that. And use it within the next 10 business days. And, what I would also encourage you to do is maybe develop your own one-pager as a leave behind with, some of these questions or issues. If you need something from me, I could, I'd be willing if you needed anything on this regard, I'd love to help out. But really the key here, what I would encourage you to think about is really identify and start the conversation. And, just phrase it the way that it was suggested with the scripts. So that is the end of today's webinar. If you have any questions, I would encourage you to ask just reach out to me. I'd love to talk with you about this. This is a challenging topic, to be sure. It's definitely something that if you're new to, I want to be as much of a resource as possible. But I'm very grateful that we've had this opportunity to get into this deep dive, and I would love to hear back from all of you at some point. So thank you all for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.